My name is Elena Ramirez, and I have lived a life needed by struggle, loss, and resilience. For over 30 years, I've woken before dawn, tying my apron before the city itself wakes. The smell of yeast and butter has been my companion, my therapy, and my legacy. I started as a dishwasher in a greasy diner with nothing but a dream, and today, I own 4 bakeries scattered across New York City. To the outside world, I'm a success story. To me, I'm just a woman who refused to crumble. 8 years ago, I lost my husband, Miguel. He was my anchor, the man who believed in me when all I had was a rolling pin and a stubborn heart. His death left a silence that no oven could fill. But I had one reason to keep going: our son, Alex. Alex became the light that pulled me through every dark morning. He grew into a thoughtful, talented man, an architect with eyes full of purpose and hands that built dreams for others. We shared everything: dinners in the bakery kitchen, stories about his work, our quiet rituals of coffee and laughter. He was my world. Then one autumn evening, as I was closing the register, my phone rang. "Mom," Alex said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I'm engaged." For a moment, I just stood there, stunned, my heart swelling. "Engaged? To who?" "Her name's Sofia Martinez," he replied. "She's amazing, a marketing director at an international firm. You'll love her." I wanted to. Heaven knows, I wanted to. Our first meeting was at Alex's apartment the following week. When Sofia walked in, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine cover, tall, graceful, dressed in a sleek cream suit that screamed elegance. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, her smile measured. She greeted me politely, her tone smooth but distant. Every answer she gave was carefully curated, as though rehearsed. There was something cold about her warmth, like sunlight filtered through glass. Still, I told myself not to judge. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she didn't know how to connect yet. Love could make anyone guarded, couldn't it? But over the following weeks, small cracks began to appear. One afternoon, during lunch, I caught Sofia whispering to Alex, just loud enough for me to hear, "Does your mom always dress like this? So plain." I froze, pretending not to notice. Alex laughed awkwardly and said, "That's her style, practical and down to earth." But the words lingered. I'd never cared for designer clothes or fancy jewelry. My pride came from honest work, not appearances. Still, it hurt, the idea that my simplicity somehow embarrassed her. When the engagement party came around, I wanted to prove I welcomed her, that I could offer warmth, even if not luxury. I closed my flagship bakery early, hung strings of soft lights, filled the room with fresh flowers and trays of my best pastries. It looked beautiful, cozy, intimate, full of heart. Sofia arrived an hour late, gliding in on high heels with her parents. They were the kind of people who carried money like armor, polished, proper, and slightly bored. The moment she stepped inside, I saw her expression falter. "Alex," she sighed, scanning the place, "I thought we'd have something more upscale." My son's face flushed. "Mom worked hard on this," he said softly. "It's perfect." But Sofia only smiled thinly. Her mother murmured something about how charming it looked, the kind of compliment that hides a wince. As the evening wore on, their disinterest was palpable. Her father scrolled through his phone, her mother sipped wine and offered comments like, "You really did all this yourself? How quaint." I kept smiling, even when my hands trembled as I refilled glasses. Then came the toasts. I stood and raised my cup of sparkling cider. "To Alex and Sofia," I began. "May your love rise like the finest bread, strong, patient, and full of warmth. Welcome to our family, dear." A small giggle broke through the silence. Sophia had leaned toward her mother, whispering, "Family. It's just her, a widowed baker pretending to be something more." The laughter that followed pierced me deeper than any insult ever had. My smile faltered. Alex's shoulders stiffened, but he said nothing. The air in the room turned heavy. My hands clenched beneath the tablecloth, and for a long moment, I felt the same sting I'd felt years ago when people told me I'd never make it out of poverty. When the guests finally left, I sat alone in the dim light, surrounded by uneaten pastries and half-filled glasses. The fairy lights flickered above me like fading stars. That night, I washed every dish by hand just to keep from crying. Hours later, I heard a knock. It was Alex. He looked exhausted, eyes full of guilt. "Mom," he said, sitting down. "She didn't mean it. She's just under pressure. Her parents can be demanding." I sighed. "Alex, she called me riffraff in front of everyone. And you said nothing." He looked away. "They're paying for the wedding," he murmured, as though that explained everything. "It's going to be huge, the vineyard estate, the catering, everything." I didn't recognize the man in front of me. My son, once so grounded, now sounded like someone chasing. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the tall windows of the mansion, painting golden lines across the polished floor. For the first time in months, I woke up warm, clean, and fed. Yet comfort didn't bring peace. It brought purpose. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, inhaling the rich aroma that reminded me of mornings long ago, when I used to sit at my kitchen table, waiting for Alexander to wake up for school. But those memories no longer brought warmth. They burned. After finishing my coffee, I walked to the study where my brother James's safe was hidden behind a framed painting. My heart pounded as I turned the dial, each click echoing in the silent room. When the lock released, I pulled open the heavy door and stared at what was inside: folders, envelopes, photographs, and several USB drives, each neatly labeled. I carried everything to the desk and began to read. The first folder contained copies of the documents I had signed, the same ones that had cost me everything. But this time, I could see the truth clearly. The clauses were twisted, written in language meant to confuse. My signature sat beside lines that handed full control of my finances and home to Alexander. Every page was a trap disguised as protection. God, how could I have been so blind? I whispered. The next folder held photographs, grainy but clear enough to make my stomach turn. Alexander sitting in a restaurant, laughing with the same lawyers who had tricked me. Rebecca beside him, raising a glass of champagne. The date on the photo was only 2 days after I had signed those papers. Then came the audio recordings. My hand shook as I pressed play. Alexander's voice filled the room, low and impatient. "Make it sound complicated but legal. Mom will sign, she always trusts me." Then Rebecca's voice followed, sharp and mocking. "She's had that house long enough. It's wasted on her. We'll finally have something to show for all your sacrifices." I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall, listening to the echo of their betrayal. The ache in my chest was heavy, but beneath it, something else stirred, a slow, burning strength. James had known. That's why he'd left me this task. He wanted me to see the truth with my own eyes, to reclaim not only what I lost, but the part of myself I'd buried beneath years of blind love. 2 days later, there was a knock at the front door. When I opened the curtains, my heart froze. Alexander and Rebecca stood outside, perfectly dressed, pretending confidence. "Mom, we know you're in there," Alexander shouted. "We need to talk." I didn't open the door. "There's nothing left to say," I replied firmly. Rebecca's voice was colder. You think that inheritance is yours? We'll contest it. Uncle James was delusional. You'll lose again. Their words no longer hurt me, they revealed who they had become. I watched them leave, then turned away from the window. The fear that once paralyzed me was gone. For the first time in years, I felt power in my hands again. With Robert's help, I spent the next few weeks gathering everything into order: documents, recordings, photographs, witness statements. The more we organized, the clearer the picture became. Years of manipulation, secret debts, and lies. Alexander had been drowning in gambling debts. He'd taken loans from dangerous people and used me as his escape route. The lawyers were bribed, the witnesses false, the story carefully spun until the world believed I was too confused to handle my own affairs. One evening, while reviewing papers, I found something I hadn't expected: a small wooden box with my name carved on the lid. Inside were letters from James, written over the years but never sent. The first was dated 15 years ago. Sophia, I wish I could undo our fight. You raised me when we lost our parents. You gave up your dreams so I could chase mine. I never thanked you properly. Another, written more recently, read: I see Alexander changing, and it worries me. Please be careful, sister. You give too much, and people take advantage of hearts like yours. By the last letter, his handwriting had weakened. You deserve justice, not revenge. If I'm gone, let this be your chance to rise again. Remember who you are, Sophia, you are strength itself. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I clutched the final letter to my chest. Thank you, James, I whispered. I won't waste this second chance. With every passing day, I felt my confidence grow. I was no longer the broken woman who slept on a park bench. I was the mother who had survived heartbreak, the sister who was reclaiming her dignity, and the woman determined to make things right. Robert and I arranged a meeting with Alexander and Rebecca. We invited them to the mansion under the guise of resolving the inheritance dispute. The dining room was set for confrontation, papers neatly stacked, a fraud expert and notary seated nearby. At exactly 10 in the morning, the door opened. Alexander walked in, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. Rebecca followed, expression smug. They were joined by their lawyers, the same ones who had taken everything from me. I stood tall at the head of the table. Thank you for coming, I said calmly. You've accused me of fraud and manipulation. It's time you hear the truth. Robert opened the first folder. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Photos of secret meetings. Recordings of their voices. Witness statements of bribes and false claims. The fraud expert explained every detail with precision. Silence filled the room. Rebecca's expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief. Alexander's hands trembled. This is illegal, he shouted suddenly. It's all documented and verified, Robert replied. You can challenge it, but the law won't be on your side. I looked at my son, the man I once believed could do no wrong. You left me homeless, I said softly. You took everything your father and I built. You called me greedy while you spent the money meant for your future. Alexander looked down, his voice breaking. I was desperate, Mom. I didn't know what else to do. You knew, I said quietly. You just didn't care. I took a deep breath. I could take you to court for fraud and elder abuse. You'd face years in prison. But I won't. Instead, I'm giving you a choice: confess publicly, return what's mine, and apologize. That's how you begin to make things right. 3 days later, Alexander came back alone. His eyes were swollen from sleepless nights. "I'll do it," he said simply. "I'll make it right." He kept his word. The next morning, he signed documents returning my assets and made a public statement admitting his wrongdoing. Rebecca left him soon after, her pride shattered. As for me, I sold James's mansion and used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for elderly people who had suffered from financial exploitation. I kept my old home, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that even when the world takes everything, resilience can rebuild it. Months later, I visited James's grave. The sun was warm on my face, and the air smelled of spring. "You were right, brother," I whispered. "Justice doesn't need revenge, it needs truth." I stood there for a long time, feeling peace settle over me. The woman who once lost everything had finally reclaimed her life.